was 11 and learning Hebrew from my grandmother. She taught me first ba, bo, be, and then words, and then sentences. And then we came to a sentence that had these 4 Hebrew letters, Yod Hey Vav Hey. And she said, that's Adonai. I said, Grandma, come on. You just taught me the Dalet for the D sound and the Nun for the N sound. They're not there. That can't be Adonai. She said, I know, just do it. So I just did it for a very, very long time. In the fall of, when was I 11? 1944. In the fall of 1982, I was teaching a course that the college said was supposed to be about Martin Buber at Swarthmore College. But turning Buber into an aboutness, that is, into an it, he's down there, we're talking about this it named Buber, seemed really terrible, especially for him. I think we should probably not treat any great teacher like an it, but the guy who talked about I, thou, as distinct from I, it, didn't seem really, menschlich at all to make Martin Buber, of all people, into an it. So I shaped the course so that we would be in real conversation with Buber, although he'd been dead for a number of years by then. But we treated Buber's writing like the Talmud. You never treat the Talmud like it's dead. You treat the Talmud like you join the conversation. It is a conversation. Somebody once wrote that it was like the records, the minutes of a free university in which people are arguing all the time, conversing all the time. So you join the conversation and the argument. And that's what we did with Buber. Literally with Buber, right, rather than about Buber. One of his amazing books is called simply Moses. And it is a kind of extraordinary examination of Moses' conversation with God. In fact, Buber wrote, when somebody asked him, why did you write this book about Moses? He said, well, I keep trying to have a conversation with God. And I figured Moses had a good one. If I could overhear Moses' conversation with God, maybe it would improve my conversation with God. So he wrote this book, Moses, and I really recommend it to you. It's an amazing book. And one of the chapters is called The Words on the Tablets. And of course, the tablets are the tablets at Sinai, on the path we are walking now toward Shavuot and the revelation at Sinai, the words, the utterances. In Hebrew, they weren't commandments. The Aseret HaDibrot were 10 utterances, spokennesses, speakings. Some of them say, do the following, or don't do the following, and others are simply affirmations of truth. So I look, and we begin to read out loud. The class begins to read person by person, a sentence or a paragraph. And I realized the first 2 words of the words on the tablets, they ain't there at all in this chapter. The first 2 words are Anochi, which is an extraordinary Hebrew word for I. The ordinary word for I in Hebrew is Ani. But Anochi, when the universe says I, it's not just Ani, which is like the Latin word for I, ego, right? Ego, everybody has an ego. That's troubling but good, or good but troubling, or good and troubling. But then there's Anochi. That's something different. But he didn't talk about Anochi. The second word on the tablet is, and here my grandmother rose up in front of me, is Yod Hey Vav Hey. In the Western alphabet, YHWH. And there wasn't anything about that either. So I stopped, and I said out loud in the midst of the class, Professor Buber, what happened to the Yod Hey Vav Hey? I know I'm not supposed to pronounce it. My grandmother said so, and actually 2,000 years worth of rabbis have said, don't pronounce it. Say Adonai, Lord, right? Lord, that's what Adonai means. And then I said, well, Professor Buber, you were a rebel, and he really was. And I'm trying to be a rebel, and I do really try. So what would happen if I disobeyed my grandmother and 2,000 years worth of rabbis and tried to pronounce it? So I'm going to pause, and I invite you, if you are willing to disobey my grandmother and 2,000 years worth of rabbis, I invite you to try pronouncing YHWH with no vowels. No matter what you learn in comparative religion course, it ain't Yahweh, which has 2 vowels in it. It ain't Yahovah, which has 3 vowels in it. Doesn't have any vowels at all. So try pronouncing YHWH, Yud Hey Vav Hey, with no vowels at all. So anybody beside the 2 rabbis want to say what happened for you? Oh, okay. So breath. And that's what happened for me. Just listen for a second as I try to pronounce YHWH, Yud Hey Vav Hey, with no vowels. So what happened for me was, first, well, that makes sense. At least one of the real names of the real God shouldn't be in Hebrew or Egyptian or Sanskrit or Latin or Greek or English or Zulu but in every human language. And the second thing that occurred to me was, it's not just human language. Every life form on this planet breathes. And each one doesn't just breathe in a little bubble all by itself. We breathe in, not just we humans, all us animals, frogs, mosquitoes, bears, humans. We breathe in what the trees and the grasses breathe out. We need to breathe in oxygen. They breathe it out. And we transmute the oxygen into carbon dioxide, which is what they need to breathe in. So we breathe in what the trees and grasses breathe out, and they breathe in what we breathe out. The life of this planet is interbreathing. That, I thought, now that is a metaphor for God that I can live with far better than Adonai, Lord, Melech, King. So I began experimenting with myself and inviting communities to join in experimenting with me in what it would mean to understand, even pronounce the name like that. So what arose was, in fact, there is a very, very ancient, totally legitimate, my grandmother wouldn't say I'm not allowed to pronounce it, name of God, Yah, Yod Hey, as in English, hallelujah is one word. Well, in Hebrew, it's two words. Hallelujah, let us praise Yah. Let us praise the breath of life. Let us praise the interbreathing of all life. Let us praise the breathing spirit of all life. In Hebrew, and actually in many other languages, there's a single word for breath, spirit, wind. Ruach in Hebrew. Pneuma in Greek. Many languages understand what we call spirit as that almost inaudible, almost invisible, almost not quite there breath as the same thing as spirit. So I began for myself and more inviting other people that where our bracha, our blessing says, well, conventionally, traditionally, my grandmother's teaching and all those rabbis, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu, our God, Melech, king, or at best, ruler of the world. Baruch Atah Eloheinu, Ruach HaOlam. Blessed are you, breathing, interbreathing. Our God, the breathing spirit of the world. So for me, this was a transformation in my own way of living in the world. And it took years for something, a next step in my understanding of what it meant to understand God that way. I finally realized as we got deeper and deeper, or at least more and more publicly clear about what we call the climate crisis. What is the climate crisis? The interbreathing of all life is out of whack. The human species has figured out how to pour more CO2 into the planet's air than the trees and the grasses can breathe in and turn into oxygen. And so the CO2 is permeating, building up, heating up, burning up, scorching up. I won't talk about global warming. Warming is so pleasant. Global scorching, global burning, far more accurate and honest. And as I began to do the work that some people might call political work, but I see as deeply and literally spiritual. Remember, spirit is breath. Spiritual, when we talk about spirituality, we're talking about breathing. When I more and more was drawn to do the spiritual work of trying to heal this planet from the overburning of fossil fuels that is burning the planet, I realized what we call the climate crisis is a crisis in God's name. A crisis in the interbreathing of all life. So for me, as with the teaching of Caesar and the image of Caesar and the image of God, for me, what people divide as spiritual and political came together again around that question. That the deepest understanding of what is sacred and divine on this planet and the deepest understanding of what is politically as well as biologically disastrous on this planet are the same.